All right, so we're transitioning into the complementary standards and technologies track because it's incredibly important that we look at the broader spectrum of standards when it comes to what the FIDO Alliance is trying to achieve around Passkey's adoption. There's a lot of work going on in other spaces that are very applicable to the work that we're doing. So here to give you an update on reusable identity for improved Passkey compliance, please welcome Abbie Barbir and Rolf Lindemann.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll use this one. Hi everyone. So my name is Abbie, and I'm on the Accountable Digital Identity Board and also representative. And this is my colleague, Rolf.
Thank you.
And with Knock Knock, you can introduce yourself.
So for the ones who don't know me, my name is Rolf Lindemann. I'm with Knock Knock, one of the original authors of the first FIDO passwordless specification, and also active in the IDEA association to make sure that we have a way to tackle the first issue as well, meaning the ID proofing and reusable identity aspect that is needed before users are onboarded, or when users are onboarded before they get the credential, when FIDO is being introduced after that.
Okay. So our agenda is we're going to talk a little bit about passkeys and regulated industry. So the compliance part in the name refer to identity vetting and enrollment. And this is why it was part of the talk. So, which means in the second bullet, we're going to talk about limitation of current identity vetting and onboarding and what we can do to improve it, which lead us to the concept of reusable identity. And this is important, reusable identity, especially if you want to do and use passkeys, because in some cases where you need identity verification and validation as part of transaction, reusable identity will be very helpful. And then we have next steps. What we are doing here, we are basing a lot of the talk on the slides about the overall scope of what the Accountable Digital Identity Association is doing. Yeah, so passkeys are great, and I'm not going to repeat what everyone else have said so far. So as far as we are concerned, the way to go is through passkeys. Don't use passwords. Passkeys should be your default. That is the default select option, as was stated in the keynotes so far. But in some cases, the passkey need to be related to a human being. And since the passkeys are actually cloud-centric, in some cases, the binding between a passkey presentation and identity layer is needed. So you need to go and do what we call KYC, know your customer transactions. This is needed for transactions that require identity binding. So the way it is done so far and how it's done by NIST, the latest NIST supplement, and including the update of 863.4 by NIST, basically you are stepping up the passkey to do the binding. And this is okay in most cases, but in some cases it is not, because the step up of a passkey, which is basically phishing resistant credential, is happening through an OTP or an SMS. So we are going back, not forward. We don't want to step up a non-phishable credential using a phishable method, and so it should be a better way. So in that case, when you go for authentication, me as a relying party, I see a passkey. The passkey is valid. The question is, are you the rightful holder and of the key that it was issued to you when I did identity vetting and validation? So this is where now we cut into identity. So how can we do that? A lot of what's happening today, the identity vetting is the old-fashioned way. You scan driving license, you do a selfie, you send that document to your relying party. This is a lot of friction and really does not really scale. the friction is on the user side. The vetting from a user perspective is not really the way the user wants to go. If I have 500 passkeys and then I have to do this with 500 different passkey providers, and sometimes with a big company that have multiple applications, you are redoing the account, the enroll over and over again. From a relying party perspective, even if they're using the best technology, like we have work here within FIDO Alliance, trying to do a common standard for document validation, okay, you still have to deal with errors. And also like enrollment, for example, if you have time constraint operation, you have to have a proper back-end system that will solve the offshoot case of when automation fail, you have to go manual. Manual is slow, okay? So, and you will be responsible for the errors. From a user perspective, the best thing the user could do is I can go get credentialed, I can get a verifiable credential, I can get an identity, and I can reuse it everywhere it is needed, okay? So the trick for doing this from a compliance perspective, how can I do it in a way that the relying party may meet its compliance and regulated commitments, while you as a user also do it in a way that you only share what needs to be shared and present what's being presented. So if you go into an ecosystem, this ecosystem have to be trustworthy plus interoperable. It should be less friction, not more friction. So in conclusion, user ID plus selfie is really not the way to go. And a lot of the current passkey recovery or stepping up is done this way. So what's the answer? The answer is reusable identity. We had some talk a little bit ago this morning from One Cosmos, Christine, about what the wallet is and what we mean by reusable identity. And here I'm going to reiterate basically what she said in her talk. In our case, reusable identity is an identity that is being held by a wallet. The wallet, we're not going to be very picky on what the wallet is. The wallet is any app could be wallet with the way we're going as far as we go. So, but the idea here is we are using standard-based credential, a verifiable credential, to put attestations about the user in that credential. This is important because interoperability can be ensured if you follow standards, and also you can follow proper trust frameworks to ensure that the credential as consumed can be of value to the relying party and of value to you as an issuer.
Okay, so to get that a little more concrete, right, it's a very abstract description. So why reusable identity? So what's the benefit of doing that in the first place? There are multiple things. If you look at that, let's assume you have 3 different accounts, maybe at a bank, maybe at an e-commerce vendor, maybe at your company. ID proofing is typically required as a first step to get there. Banks have their requirements on that. E-commerce vendors do a different thing. But there's always some step to happen. And often, as we heard, it's selfie plus picture ID, right, or the user ID, which is sharing some data. And that has an impact. Attackers are already focused on that sign-up process. Especially in Germany, we have seen interesting attacks of those picture ID and selfie checks. RPs need to strengthen the ID proofing. We learned that KBA, right? All these identity-related questions to understand whether your name might be correct or not are not really effective anymore because secrets don't exist on that layer. And there's a usability impact. So everyone that has gone through such a process knows that it takes time to fiddle with whatever. 3 different hands would be very handy in that situation, but you only have 2. Now, it is not very nice for users. So there's one more, and this is a privacy impact. With that, maybe you only have to prove you're over 18, right? With an e-commerce vendor to get the wine shipped to you, or over 16, depending on the country. Now, they get the picture and they get all the identity-related data. In the US, it's likely the driver's license, so they know what car you can drive or not drive. Who is interested in that information, right? This is really oversharing at best, right? So that's, you're oversharing a lot of data. Relying parties in reality don't want to get that data because now it's their liability to keep it secret and not get the data stolen. So that's we need to avoid the need to collect and copy too much data, which is done today, right? So reusable identity really changes that picture. It essentially introduces an identity hub there, or allows relying parties that already got the data or are original verifiers of the data, sometimes even the government, to be part of that picture and say, now I can share an attribute with those relying parties. And now users have to undergo that ID proofing process, the in-person process, only once, typically at birth, right? When you get your first credentials, or when you get the university degree credentials and those things. But after that, it can be shared electronically, which means you are not needing, you don't need many minutes to share that data. It's only seconds. It's a click away, which is the usability side of the house. And then there's a next side, which is the security side. It's significantly more secure. So we really reduce the onboarding time and complexity. You need an incentive for the people to participate in that process and even avoid that selling of the data, right? So there's a lot of incentives in California, also the Privacy Act. In Europe, we have GDPR, which incentivizes companies to not overshare data. And so there's one more, right, to even get money back potentially by allowing users to share the data as opposed to the companies sharing the data that they have. You want a robust and security interoperability to do all that, like the phishing resistance, that as a term, which is much better. And if you remember, there's a lot of attacks on the selfie plus picture ID schemes. And to bypass that, use generative AI to simulate the user. And with reusable identity, we can really get beyond that and make it much more practical for users to use that kind of process. It needs to be inclusive and make the device, thank you, the device enable to share the data, right, and make device change easy as well, because we know we have multiple devices. They are good for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then we get to a new device. And finally, we relying parties don't want a big database with all the biometric data from the customers where we have done the ID proofing. And if you look at those companies, they always try to find ways to avoid storing the biometric data. And we have seen different approaches for that. But in general, people don't want too much data because it's an attractive attack target. So that brings us back to using decentralized identity in a more, or reusable identity in a more electronic, more secure fashion, just done completely different.
Okay, so thank you, Rolf. So now, what enables the decentralization? The verifiable credential is one tool. The more important tool is the decentralized ID. Decentralized ID is important because it's unique within the context of its creation, plus it points to a document that has public-private key pairing. So now, all of a sudden, you have an identifier that you can bind into a user. And you could use that as part of a wallet and the verifiable credential overall system. So why it's good? Because now, if you use a wallet type system, the wallet is anchored to a user through a public-private key pair. The credential is signed by a public-private key pair. You, as a user presenting the entities you have public-private key pair, you can put high assurance level for identity re-onboarding or onboarding, using the DID. And the DID is designed to be provable, and also you could have disposable DIDs. You don't need to marry a DID for life. You can have a DID for a single use. But it has the same properties. And this is what enabled the whole ecosystem. Okay? A subject ID on a verifiable credential can be a DID that resolves to a known public-private key pair. What's another key factor and the importance of the DID with the DID document? You can do key rotation. If your DID gets stolen or other stuff, you can also have the history of all the DID that you have used. You can reissue DID and improve the DID and have a key rotation on the DID document, okay? So it enables a whole ecosystem of the portability where you can take an identity, make it usable, and also make it bindable to a device or any set of devices through the combination of the DID and a wallet with a wallet key. So give us a very good flexibility in taking a passkey and making it, use this solution to re-vet or upgrade the trust in the passkey. All of this is done through standards, okay? So there is the ecosystem for trust, it changes here. The issuer is an issuer that is well known, that can issue a credential on your behalf and sign it. The holder, in combination with the digital identity, have a place to put the credentials in their wallet. The verifier, which is a relying party, can go make sure that the issuer, the holder can present a credential to it, and the verifier can verify it. The issuer is not in the way, because we could validate the PKI through the VDR, basically. The VDR in the older days used to be required to be a blockchain or a ledger. Now we don't need to do that. Any distributed system it could be. So the VDR could be like very similar to what we do with Passkey with the metadata directory. It's somehow of an ecosystem to validate the authenticity of keys, you know. So we plug into this infrastructure. So, you know, W3C credential, now with the credential there are multiple types. The two important ones are the W3C verifiable credentials, and also you have the ISO ones, which is the MDL. There is some difference in how they are done, but at the end of the day, what they do, they give you the metadata that who the issuer is when the credential is issued, under what conditions the credential is issued, and when it expires, and there's claims about it, and also the proof. This needs to be signed, so it will be of value. You could, in most cases, and in older days, they had asserted like a sovereign type identity, where you could start by having a credential that's issued by you. The value of those credentials are lower, because if you want to consume it, you need to upgrade it back to a higher value credential. So the credential as issued, if you say, let's say we're doing a KYC credential, it has an assurance level with it. It means what was used to issue the credential and what are the attributes. When you present it from the wallet to the verifier, there is another key coming for the presentation, that you could do selective disclosure. So like what Rolf was saying, you don't need to share all of your driving license. You can share your age if you want, or make attestation through the wallet saying I am over 18, or I live in New York, so I can, if I'm doing betting on an app that requires you to be a resident of a state, you can say I belong to that state. Okay, so you know, now we have from a user, the holder, you have multiple issuers that can offer credentials to the end user. The verifiers can pick and choose what they consume. This wallet can be one or more wallet, okay? So, you know, you don't need only to marry one wallet. You can be like using multiple wallets. And most people will end using multiple wallets because they have wallets for professional use. They have credentials that need it for business. They have wallets that have credentials that uses for vacation and other stuff. So you, as the holder, with the verifiable credential design, you pick and choose where you put the wallet, which wallet to use, and where you put the credential. Which tell, for the overall system to have the proper integrity, we need to have a proper governance where the wallet is known wallet to the verifier and to the issuer, so they can trust the wallet. So for this to really make sense and work, we need to have a proper governance. And it's still lacking here because now we don't have a standardized governance, solutions. But the accountable digital identity is working on that, on part of the governance, which is spitting it out as a separate entity. The governance of the verifiable credential should be separate from how it is used. And so within a credential, as you know, like this is an example of a credential, there are attributes, and like your name, gender, school, major. You can have one or multiple credentials to convey a relationship that you want to be presented, and the verifiable presentation can have one or multiple claims done on your behalf. And it can be done in a smart way through what we call selective disclosure, okay? So all of this supported. So, you know, with what we're doing from IDEA, we are spinning different directions. So the credential to be consumable, the schema of it has to be understandable, and the minimum attribute that is used has to be usable. in the credential. So a relying party, if they want to open an account for you, they should be able to consume a credential in your wallet that give them the attribute needed to create the credential, but also you should be able to do selective disclosure when you present the credential. They should know the issuer issued the credential to meet NEST IL2 or 3 or vice versa. You can do biometric binding in the credential. Okay, so you can have all of that also like in your app where it is a QR code. You go to a place, you don't need, you just present the QR code on your phone. You know, you could validate because your image is in there, your biometric, your point of sale person can validate it's you. It's a mutual authentication, it's multi-factor. So all of this could be done. You can enable a whole ecosystem of services, okay? So why this is important? It's important because now we can streamline and have the ability to deploy reusable identity for users in a way that makes sense. You get certified, credited once, and now we can use that with any IDP that need to go and deliver the trust of a passkey. And you know, it's part of the whole automation. And you could even protect your wallet with a proper combination with a passkey. So our passkey is not like in competition. Passkey is the way to go, you know? With the additional wrappers that you want, we want them to be as strong as the passkey, not lower. Okay, so we still have the passkey as the fundamental. So, oops. Okay, so this is the EDIA interchange. The EDIA provides services where you could have interchanges and brokers that provide any one of those services. Some of the services that we could provide is identity escrow. For example, you are a citizen of one country and then the country don't want you anymore. That credential that got issued to you before, okay, you could keep it. The signature is valid, but you know, even if it is revoked, you could prove at some point I used to be from country XYZ. So you could have that ability. So also, if the interchanges can do cross-domain. A credential issued in North African country, when it comes and you are visiting in the US, if you want to rent a car, the car rental company needs to be able to say it's the same, it's equivalent to an international driving license. So the brokers can do this. So, you know, it's a full-blown architecture that have the governance layer top, but the protocol to do the exchanges in a meaningful way where it gives you an equivalent of a digital addresses like an email, where you can use an email readable thing to get all the data and all this stuff that you want. And it's built on top of FIDO. Our wallet and the wallet authentication is built on FIDO and on Passkey. So we are doing an extension of FIDO services in EDIA, okay? So, I still have 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So in general, passkeys are essential. We have done a great job with passkeys. The next stage forward is for making passkey even more usable, is to address the verifiable credential and like what Cisco did in the pinpointed in the keynote. That part of the puzzle is still need to be worked on. What does this to happen require? We need to have trust anchors, trust ecosystems where we can trust the life cycle management of the credential. The credential should be readable by everybody. The credential also should be resolvable by every relying party, and the schema is understood and trusted. So from EDIA, the version 2 of the spec is on the EDIA website, is ediaassociation.org. Louis here, he's the editor. If you have any questions or you want more questions, talk to Louis as the editor of the specification. We have an open source coming. You know, we're going to make announcement. EDIA is merging with a bigger entity, so we're going to grow, and we're going to be much more global. We already now very much in Asia and in North America, but will become also much bigger in Europe. That announcement is coming in a couple of weeks, so the paperwork is being signed. So, you know, we invite you to come in and participate. Please read the specification and give us feedback because, you know, this is why we are presenting it here. We want input.
That leaves time for maybe one question, I think.
Does anyone in the room have a question? We do. So this is a question that we received in the app, but terminology-wise, like a level setting on terminology, if you could help us out. 'Cause folks talk a lot about decentralized identity, and then you're talking about reusable identity. Is there an easy way to distinguish or, wrap your head around like those two concepts? Are they different? Are they?
For me, reusable is a more generic term. There is typically a connotation with what decentralized identity means. Right? There's no central entity that proves an attribute. There's always a need to rely on governments for primary identity attributes. So I think reusable identity is typically the better term. Self-sovereign identity is a term that was used even before that, which has additionally a different connotation to that. So I think it's more neutral, reusable identity. There are many things you want to accomplish. There are some things we need to avoid to really have the trust and accountability being part of the whole ecosystem there.
Hi. Outside of blockchain, what other public decentralized ledgers are there that are available?
Maybe you want to take that?
You can have, like, if you're talking about the DID, you can have the web DID. So basically, a company can offer the DID to be hosted on their own systems. You don't need like a Bitcoin DID or an ETH. But also the way IDEA is working, the DID resolution, you can put IDEA in any DLT platform and running as a service. All what you want from the app developer, whether they should care about the ledger or not. The short answer, they don't. When it's just give me a DID, register a DID, or whatever, it's just like an API call. They don't need to worry about the ledger. So we are doing all that abstraction. If you can do a WebAuthn call, you can do an IDEA call. So from a developer, it's not going to make that much difference.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abbie and Rolf.
Thank you.
Thank you.